With the Nintendo Switch plowing ass as hard as it is, it's only natural for the internet to have a lot to say about the little hybrid that could. However, most Switch content on the internet either praises the very best games or buries the very worst ones, and rarely do people ever honor the games in between. So that's why today, my fat ass decided to take it upon myself to determine the very best so-so Switch games to date. And when I say so-so, I'm not necessarily talking about hidden gems or games nobody's ever heard of. I'm just talking about all the games that didn't suck ass, but also weren't too much fun to play either. So basically anything that's one step away from being a guilty pleasure. And you might be asking yourself why I'm dedicating an entire video to Switch games that were only moderately fun. But the reason I'm doing this is because the very best Switch games are going to be glorified till the end of time, and the very worst is still never going to be forgotten. Meanwhile, most of the games I'm going to be talking about in this video won't get much attention after their initial release hype fades. So make yourselves comfortable, hit the record button on your VCR, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, the world's worst full-grown boy Cameron, to tell you the 11 best Nintendo Switch games to date that were just alright. Number 11. No More Heroes, Travis Strikes Again. The first two No More Heroes games on the Wii had you play as an otaku named Travis Touchdown, who brutally slaughters bad guys with an off-brand lightsaber called the Beam Katana while using wrestling moves for good measure. These games didn't set the world on fire, but they did become cult classics and sold decently enough to warrant a third installment. So after waiting 9 years, we finally get Travis Strikes Again. And unfortunately, this isn't exactly No More Heroes 3, but rather a simplistic test game to see if the franchise is popular enough to put the time and effort into a true sequel. And despite a lot of fans being disappointed, this game still does have a lot to offer if you lower your expectations. The presentation's amazing, the signature humor and charm's still here, and just about everything makes us feel like a No More Heroes game, aside from the top-down perspective anyway. Which doesn't exactly ruin the gameplay, but after a while it starts to feel repetitive. And if it wasn't for the repetitive nature, then I'd consider this game a must-own. But sadly, Travis's smartass remarks alone aren't enough to carry the game on its own. If you're in the market for a mindless multiplayer hack and slash that isn't too much fun though, then you might want to consider picking up Travis Strikes Again. Number 10. Ukelele. Much like Travis Strikes Again, everything about this game's absolutely amazing, aside from the gameplay. And unfortunately, good gameplay is the most important thing about a video game. That's not to say that Ukelele's bad, though. I'm actually playing through right now and having a good time, but unless you're a diehard fan of Banjo-Kazooie, I can't recommend this as a must-buy. And I plan on making a video going into more detail as to why. But long story short, the levels are way too big and don't have much to do. Despite this game not being a must-own, though, if you already have all the Switch's must-own titles, then I'd say Ukelele's the 10th greatest should probably own game. Number 9. Shoe. I know most people don't give a monkey's patoot about this game or even know what it is, but I've got a little bit of a soft spot for it since it's the first game this channel ever got a press kit for. But don't assume that soft spot wasn't earned though, because let me tell you, this game brings some solid above average action platforming to the table. It plays a lot like Yoshi's Island, where you can simply just beat the stages by reaching the end. Or you could really challenge yourself by collecting everything in between. The graphics and music are pleasant, the gameplay's super solid, the controls are reliable, and all the different allies you meet throughout the game with different abilities prevent the game from becoming stale. My main problem with Shoe, though, is that with a game that puts so much effort into keeping things fresh, it just doesn't last long enough to make an impression with the game only having 15 stages. The overall experience would have been much better if it just had a little more meat and potatoes. And if it weren't for me going out of my way to honor the very decentest Switch games of all time, then Shoe would have probably just kept slipping through the cracks. Number 8. Fire Emblem Warriors. Fire Emblem Warriors is essentially Dynasty Warriors, but with the main difference being that there's almost as many playable Fire Emblem characters as there are in Smash Ultimate. I would put Hyrule Warriors on here instead since Zelda's much more interesting for this concept, but I'm trying my best not to focus on ports, and I'm already pushing it with Ukelele. I know this game was also on the 3DS for some reason, but that was a simultaneous release, so suck it. I know it sounds like I don't like this game, but even though I haven't played it all that much, I did play the aforementioned Hyrule Warriors for a good little bit. It may have been on the Wii U, but come on, they're all just Dynasty Warriors games with different characters. And even though Fire Emblem Warriors has a reputation of being the worst of the three, it's still a fun hack and slash even if it is a bit mindless. But sometimes turning your brain off for entertainment can be underrated, and all the best games for the Switch require using your noodle. So if you're a Switch owner who likes Hyrule Warriors, then consider picking up Fire Emblem Warriors for a moderately good time. Number 7. Super Bomberman R. I may not be the biggest Bomberman fan in the history of the universe, but I'm a bit more than a casual observer, and I have enough experience with the series to know that a game this simplistic doesn't justify a $50 price tag. However, if you could overlook the price, which I'm sure is going to drop significantly before I even graduate from my neighbor Terry's training course in CPR, then you'll find that Super Bomberman R is an incredibly passable experience. The single player is not interesting enough for me to finish the game, and the camera gets a little annoying sometimes, but the anime cutscenes add a good amount of pizzazz and the multiplayer is as classic as ever. But if we're talking about adequate multiplayer experiences on the Switch, then how could we not talk about Number 6. Mario Tennis Aces. Being one of Nintendo's only new first-party games of 2018, Mario Tennis Aces probably got a lot more attention than it normally would have. But now that the Switch's infamous drought of 2018's over, this game feels like something that came from a Mandela effect because most people completely forgot about its existence. Which is fair, because it is just Mario Tennis. But goddammit, it's still a good entry to the series. To be honest though, the only other Mario Tennis game I actually put a lot of time into was on the Virtual Boy, oddly enough, so I'm really not qualified to say whether or not Aces is the best in the series. But regardless of where this game ranks within its own franchise, the very legacy of the Mario Tennis series is that it's always been pretty good. Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, whenever somebody finds a cheap copy of Mario Tennis at a thrift store or something, you only really see them mildly amused. And you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody to tell you their favorite games in the Mario Tennis series. It's just kinda something that every Nintendo console has, and it's always slightly above decent, with Aces being no different, which is why it easily found a spot on this list, further cementing Mario Tennis' spot in the Hall of Fame of so-so video games. Number 5. Kirby Star Allies. There's an assload of Kirby games out there, and if I'm being honest, I only find a few of them to be truly great. I think the majority of them are just okay, and Star Allies certainly falls into that category. The graphics, music, and all that are fine and dandy like sour candy, but the gameplay's even easier than tricking me into joining a new religion. If you recently suffered through severe brain trauma though, then the low difficulty of Star Allies is quite the average experience if I do say so myself. And it's even better if you're playing with friends. Sadly though, the most difficult thing about this game is finding the desire to keep playing it. Whenever I play it, I find myself putting it back on the shelf after a few levels, cause finishing it kinda feels like a chore. But despite the fact that there's a million better games to play instead, if you happen to have Star Allies in front of you, then you're definitely gonna be entertained, especially if you're sleeping or dead. All jokes about the low difficulty aside though, this game is fun and you should definitely check it out if you don't have anything better to play. Number 4. Super Mario Party. Despite the game's bad reputation, I actually think it's amazing. I don't give a monkey's nutsack that there's only 4 boards, because the minigames are the best they've been in a long time. But the reason this game made the list of mediocrity is because there's way too many conditions that need to be met for the game to be enjoyable. I mean, it's not like you're gonna play it by yourself without your dad sending you to a therapist, so multiplayer is definitely the way to go. But the problem is you can't play with anybody online unless your idea of fun consists of not using boards, which basically makes local multiplayer your only option. But if you're like me and you've burned every bridge you've ever had in your life, then you probably won't have anybody to play with. So even though Super Mario Party can be awesome, there's just way too many sucky things that ultimately render this game as simply par. Number 3. Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. I know I said I'd tried not to include ports, but how could I leave a game off this list when decency was the end goal of the developers? Even though you can 100% this game in like 2 minutes, it's still a must-play for Switch owners who love puzzle games. For the 1% of you who are fans of the Adventure Lolo games on the NES, Treasure Tracker's a similar deal on steroids. The music's memorable, the characters are funny, and the puzzles make you think. In fact, I dare say this game might actually be great. But the fact is that after 100%ing it on the Wii U when it first came out, I consciously decided not to buy it again for the Switch, unlike some of the other Wii U games that were ported over. And the reason for that's because Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker is just plain decent. Number 2. Bloodstained, Curse of the Moon. When I initially played Curse of the Moon, I thought it was fantastic. In fact, I still do think that even. I mean, it's a spiritual successor to 2D Castlevania, what more could you ask for? But when I was compiling this list, all I kept thinking was, if the game was so good, why haven't I gotten all the endings? After I beat it once, I just kinda sat there and said,
Okay, I get it.
This adequate game may be a goddamn fantastic one, but given the fact that nobody really talks about it anymore, nor did anybody's videos on it get decent views, I'd say the rest of the world agrees that Curse of the Moon's no big deal, even if they say that it is. Number 1. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. This is probably the most polarizing Switch game that'll ever be, due not only to the integration of the Pokemon Go mechanics, but also because the Pokemon Company kept telling everyone these are core games to make them feel more important and increase the sales. But now that Pokemon Sword and Shield are going to restore balance to the universe, all the paranoia about the mainline Pokemon series becoming a watered-down mess faded away. So now that the traditional Pokemon games are officially not in danger anymore, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee can finally be looked at for what they are. And what they are pretty good games. Almost too good for this list even, but because of the oversimplified catching mechanics taking a lot of the fun away, it's hard for me to consider this remake of the Game Boy game anything special. If you're open to playing Diet Pokemon though, then Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are what I consider to be the best OP okay games on the Nintendo Switch to date. But I'll tell you, two people who are above just okay are today's patrons of the day, Andrew Lawler and the Vidya Bros. If you want to join these two legends, then consider supporting this channel on Patreon for loot boxes and Polaroids in the mail. And if you pick up one of our shirts or mugs that are guaranteed to land you a hot date, then you can make cameos in our video doing whatever you want by simply sending us pictures or videos of you rocking it like these badasses right here. What are your favorite so-so Nintendo Switch games, though? Is there anything I missed? Is anything I mentioned too good to be here? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll pin whatever I find most entertaining or intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to see more videos like this. And if you want to help this channel grow, then simply liking and sharing goes a long way. My name's Cameron, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.